The Lady of the Green Kirtle, a creature as beautiful as she is deadly, with a magic powerful enough to control entire worlds, and a blinding thirst for power that would fuel a relentless drive to conquer nations. Of all the characters in the world of Narnia, none is more mysterious. Upon first reading, countless questions surround her. Who is she? Where did she come from? How did she get her magic? What exactly were her true plans for Narnia? We've had an incredible number of requests to cover the lore behind the Green Witch, and we're happy to oblige. When we started to dive in, we were surprised how much there was to actually cover. So we're going to break this series down into two parts. Today, we'll dive into the known and the unknown, the mystery and the reality surrounding the Lady of the Green Kirtle. Next week, we'll delve into the theories and speculations related to her origin, her identity, and the source of her magic. I have to tell you, some of these theories are absolutely fascinating, and it's an episode you won't want to miss. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss it. Well, there's a lot to cover, so let's get started. It's time to leave the Shadowlands behind and step into a world that's more real than our own. It's time to follow me into the wardrobe. 1,300 years after the Pevensey children were transported through the wardrobe, Narnia had become a very different place. 400 years prior, the Telmarines had invaded and conquered the land, and Caspian I took the throne as the king of Narnia. And now his descendant, Caspian X, was no longer the young prince who sailed the eastern seas with his scrappy crew on the Dawn Treader. He was now a grown man, with a young knight for a son named Prince Rinian, and a wife from the east who was beloved throughout all of Narnia for her wisdom, graciousness, and profound joy. It was even said that the blood of stars flowed through her veins. Tragically, one day while riding in the northern woods, the queen was bitten by a great serpent, as green as poison, and despite all efforts to save her, she died within a matter of minutes. The whole land was in great anguish at the queen's death, but none more so than Prince Rinian, who would thereafter spend his days in the northern lands searching for the great worm that killed his mother. Rinian's obsession may have continued for years, if not for a strange meeting that occurred while he was out searching in the northern wilds one day. Rinian eventually revealed the details of this meeting to his trusted advisor, Lord Rinian. Here's what we read in the Silver Chair. One evening, Rinian said to the prince, "Your Highness must soon give over seeking the worm. There was no true vengeance on a witless brood as there might be on a man. You weary yourself in vain." The prince answered him, "My lord, I have almost forgotten the worm this 7 days." Rinian asked him why, if that were so, he rode so continually in the northern woods. "My lord," said the prince, "I have seen the most beautiful thing that was ever made." "Fair prince," said Rinian, "of your courtesy, let me ride with you tomorrow, that I may also see this fair thing." "With a good will," said Rinian. Then, in good time on the next day, they saddled their horses and rode a great gallop into the northern woods and alighted at that same fountain where the queen got her death. Rinian thought it was strange that the prince would choose that place of all places to linger in. And there they rested until it came to high noon, and at noon Rinian looked up and saw the most beautiful lady he had ever seen. And she stood at the north side of the fountain and said no word, but beckoned to the prince with her hand, as if she bade him come to her. And she was tall and great, shining, and wrapped in a thin garment as green as poison. And the prince stared at her like a man out of his wits. But suddenly, the lady was gone. Rinian knew not where, and the two returned to Cair Paravel. It stuck in Rinian's mind that this shining green woman was evil. And so, as mysteriously as the Green Lady appeared, she also disappeared. And while throughout the saga of the Silver Chair, there's a lot we discover about her, there seems to be even more left unanswered. One question that's often asked is pretty simple to answer, actually. What exactly is a kirtle? Well, put simply, it's a type of women's clothing, usually an overdress, and it quite often helps to identify the social status of the woman wearing it. As it turns out, this particular lady was also of a particularly unusual social status indeed. We'll soon discover that while appearing to be a beautiful and young woman, the Lady of the Green Kirtle is actually a very old, very ancient in fact, and very powerful witch. Prince Rinian claimed that she was of a divine race that knew neither age nor death. She was certainly ancient. For one thing, she was there when the carvings of the giant city were written, long before the only remains of the carvings were the words, "Under me." Interestingly enough, there was also another witch from the north who also possessed the power of eternal youth. But we'll get to that in the next episode. So we know now that the Emerald Lady was obviously a great and powerful witch, but why exactly was she in Narnia, and what did she want? It turns out she was as cunning and calculated as she was beautiful. For quite some time apparently she'd been occupying the Underland, living in the dark castle that lay across the sunless sea, in the heart of the great city of the Shallowlands. With Rinian as her captive and the Earthmen as her slaves, she had been slowly executing a plan to conquer Narnia. Yes, she was cunning. For rather than relying on her own power and brute force to conquer Narnia, she executed a 10-year plan that involved reducing the Narnian royal family down to a single, feeble old king with an apparently dead bloodline. During that time, she amassed an army and engineered a sophisticated tunnel system which would allow her forces to infiltrate the heart of Narnia in a surprise attack. And when she had won her campaign, she would have the heir to the Narnian throne as her own personal puppet. Besides her cunning mind and her power of eternal youth, she also possessed the power to shapeshift. Yes, it's no surprise that, spoiler alert, the green worm who killed the beloved queen was actually the Lady of the Green Kirtle in serpent form. Ironically, it was Prince Rinian who believed he was the one in danger of becoming a terrible, deadly serpent. And it's the reason he allowed himself to be chained to the silver chair each night for 10 years. However, the queen finally revealed her dark power in a great and climactic moment when Puddleglum broke the queen's enchantment. Here's what we read in the silver chair. The instrument dropped from her hands. Her arms appeared to be fastened to her sides, her legs were intertwined with each other, and her feet had disappeared. The long green train of her skirt thickened and grew solid, and seemed to be all one piece within the writhing green pillar of her interlocked legs. And that writhing green pillar was curving and swaying as if it had no joints, or else were all joints. Long before there was time to do anything, the change was complete. And the great serpent which the witch had become, green as poison, thick as Jill's waist, had flung 2 or 3 coils of its loathsome body around the prince's legs. The Lady of the Green Kirtle had some incredible abilities, but in spite of all of her magic, perhaps her greatest power was the ability to psychically manipulate the minds of others. Indeed, she not only blinded the mind of Prince Rinian, but she also implanted suggestions into the minds of Jill and Eustace. Most strikingly, she used her magic to bring an entire population of Earthmen under her complete and total control. She utilized various tools to accomplish this, whether it was her dazzling beauty, her sing-song voice, her strange glowing fire, or even her slowly strummed instrument. By the way, there was another Narnian character who used magical music to lull their victim to sleep, but that's another story. What made the witch's power so terrifying? Well, it wasn't because she could just cause others to temporarily do her bidding. It was much worse than that, with consequences much more devastating. The witch's power was so terrible because she actually caused her victims to forget truths that were fundamental about their existence. The truth of who they were, the truth of where they came from, and the truth of what they were called to do. And when a person forgets those foundational truths, well, that's a fate worse than death. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but I'd love to hear from you as we prepare for next week's episode. So leave a comment below and tell me your theory about the origin of the Lady of the Green Kirtle. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on the next incredible episode. I look forward to joining you next time as we take another journey into the wardrobe.